Welcome, everyone. I am Nicole Solis, a Rhode Island mom fighting school indoctrination and the teacher's lawsuit against me. I'm here today as a fellow with Independent Women's Forum to talk with G. Van Fleet. She's another mom fighting not just school indoctrination, but the slow creep of Marxism into our American institutions. Xi Van Fleet grew up in Mao's China. She spent her entire school years in Mao's Cultural Revolution. After completing high school, she was forced by the CCP to go to the countryside to work in the fields for 3 years to be re educated by the peasants, like all other urban high school graduates. She was able to go to college after Deng Xiaoping seized power. In 1986, she came to America as a student to pursue her graduate studies. She has been working in the field of information management for the past 30 years. As a private citizen, she has never been involved politically. But compelled by her personal experience during the Chinese Cultural Revolution and the realization that what she has experienced is taking place in America, she has committed herself to warn the American people and help them to clearly see what is really happening now in America. She was recently banned from Twitter, and she was banned without explanation by the Twitter overlords for a week in what she called her re education camp. She was magically reinstated yesterday again without explanation, and she's here to talk about this random or maybe not so random attack on her free speech in what is the premier media platform in America. So, hi, She. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It's great to see you. I know that we've met a few times in DC and we're always seeing each other on the news. So now's the first time we get to talk in more of a formal setting and
Yes.
really get to,
Mhm.
talk about stuff that maybe, we can't really go into detail in because you and I are so busy. Um, so I know that I first saw you on Fox News as a mom in Loudoun County. Was that the first time that you entered the public arena when that happened to you? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was absolutely the first time. And I've been in this country for over 30 years. And in the beginning, I have to say, I was not politically alert, aware, just not paying enough attention, just focus on making my American dream come true, which means very narrowly at the time, just get a good job, buy a house, raise a family, and freedom is always there. Yeah. So, but in the past decade, I start to see a lot of troubling sign, which remind me of the Cultural Revolution and that I experienced and grew up in. And still, as a typical Chinese or Asian, usually we're not very active. We're usually kind of shy in public spaces, and that's typical. I am just one of them. And but in 2020, seeing our American cities being burned by, obviously to me, American Red Guards, and so the American now we have Chinese Cultural Revolution at our front doorstep. And at that moment, I said, I cannot remain silent anymore. I have to get involved. So I joined the local conservative groups, and one of them is the Loudoun County Republican Women's Club. And they're very active. I got email from them, and one of them, actually, the first email I got is go to school board. And I said, well, I really don't have children in school anymore. They said, doesn't matter. You're still a taxpayer. And I said, what did I say? He said, anything. I said, I know what I want to say. So I went there and delivered that speech, thinking that's the end of it, that I participated, I did my duty, and of course, I was not prepared at all when Fox News called. And to me, that was a major step that to to step into the spotlight. And I just feel like I was scared to death, and I just feel like I was not ready. I just, but I just feel something was guiding me and telling me this is not about you anymore. It's about America. So I said yes, and that's the beginning of my career as a fighter against communism here. And so that's the short story.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because, people like you and I, we don't have careers in politics. We didn't have experience with media. but we're doing this really on our own time because we really believe that this is an urgent issue. So I think stories like ours really undercut the narratives that, parents like you are like political operatives, that you have some nefarious intent, when really this is kind of difficult for you because this is not in your
Very,
nature,
very
right? To
scary.
go public. I mean, it's nerve-wracking, right? You don't want to say the wrong thing or what like looks like the wrong thing. So
Yes.
I just really want to commend you for doing that because you're an inspiration to me too.
Thank you. You
Because this
too. You
is,
too.
thank you. So let's talk about what happened on Twitter, because after you were on Fox News and then you were doing more interviews, you took, like many of us, to social media so that way you could have your own platform to keep sending the message that you want to send. But you were banned. Do you think you were targeted by Twitter? Do you think this was random, like with their algorithm? What do you think happened?
Okay, let me tell you a little bit how I got involved in Twitter. And I was not in any social media. The only thing I did is Instagram, because I'm a photographer. I share my travel photos, and that's the limited experience I have with social media. So after I got involved, and I was constantly invited to speak at a different event or interview, and people just said I should get engaged in social media. I said, I don't know how. I have no idea. So a friend of mine set Facebook account and Twitter account for me, and I learned how to use Facebook. But Twitter was just really challenging for me. I never followed Twitter of anyone's, and but this, last December, I finally decided to learn how to tweet. And actually, before that, I did not tweet anything, but I have followers. One day I saw the on my phone screen, someone said, "She, please start to tweet." I was like, maybe I really should. So I taught myself how to tweet. And actually, I asked you for advice how to tweet. Yeah, because
Right.
I just
I remember.
did not know how. And so I remember the first time I sent out the tweet by myself, I was scared to death because I know that is a big world out there. And basically, I'm again exposed myself to all sorts of possible attacks and whatever. But I managed it well, and I engage with quite a few individually, not face to face, online, and just expose my. Okay, my focus my of Twitter is very narrow. I only focus on communism and here and in China, and do the comparison and expose that what's going on here is the wokeness that we experience here is communism and CRT and all that. And um, so I do believe that the things I said upset those in power, those control Twitter. So I believe this is not random, even though they never give me any explanation. And the last post was my photo with Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears. So there's no trigger that I can find. So I do think that I'm on their list, and they want to give me a lesson. I think the lesson is obvious: is you be careful what you say, otherwise you will be gone. And they want me to self-censor. That's the message I get. That's why I called Twitter re-education camp for me.
Yes. Yes. Well, let's talk a little bit about Twitter, and then we can get into maybe the similarities that you see between America and communist China. Um, so Twitter is treated as a neutral platform by the government, and accordingly, it's granted exemptions to certain laws that would normally apply to a media outlet. I think most of us regard Twitter as a media outlet and a public forum in all but name, right? We all
Yes.
expect to have our protected speech respected and not censored, but that's really not what's happening on Twitter. Now, they get exemptions from laws, specifically Section 230 of what's called the Communications Decency Act. And this exemption allows Twitter to be exempt from liability for what others say and do on its platform, which makes sense because you don't want people going on Twitter saying something libelous, and then now Twitter is going to be liable, for that libel in the same way that a newspaper, which is responsible to editorialize, substantiate claims, so that way they don't produce or publish libelous information that can harm another individual. And the purpose of Twitter being exempt from this law that holds them accountable for what other people say and do is to allow free speech to flourish. So let me just read what this law says. It specifically says that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. And any listener that wants to look that up, it's 47 USC section 230. So Twitter's granted this legal exemption to help free speech flourish, but I think it's obvious that they're taking advantage of this exemption because they are editorializing, right? The expectation is that they don't editorialize, and really they're going beyond editorializing. They're censoring, because you were banned from Twitter for a week. I was banned from Twitter for a week during the same time that Babylon Bee was banned. And then someone else was banned that was really big. I forgot who it was. And, for us, for me, Babylon Bee and someone else, which I know I'm not like as big as Babylon Bee, they're amazing, but we were all talking about transgender issues. Mm-hmm. When you get banned, when you come back, you have to agree to not say what you said before. You actually have to delete what you said. So just that action alone is really the re-education, right? You're getting punished for what you said or did on Twitter. And then you are kind of afraid to say something like that again, because especially like people like you and I, we have all these followers, right? And we feel like we're making headway by moving the needle a little bit with public awareness. And it becomes something that you're kind of afraid to lose. So sometimes I'm like, ooh, should I say that? I don't want to lose my voice here. But then I'm like, well, what's the point of being on here if I can't say what I think is important? And so I kind of struggle with that. Do you struggle with that?
Yes, absolutely. I think their goal is self-censor, make yourself, censor yourself. And so I have to say, I know, of course, even when I was not engaging in Twitter, I heard from news, and even the president of the United States was banned from Twitter. So I know that people banned, conservative voice was banned left and right. So I was thinking, I'm just a small fish,
Right.
But even though I quickly, in a matter of 4 months, I had more than 9,000 followers, and I suspect that the number was manipulated. One day I lost 100 followers, and I just thought that's not quite normal. But still, I think absolutely little fish. Not anymore. I think that they just don't like any dissenting voices, and somehow I made it to their list.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's my suspicion too. I'm always losing followers. I'm losing likes. Twitter unlikes everything that I like. And every comment in in a reply to my tweet is shadow banned. So you have to click on some warning that says this is sensitive comment just to read what other people are saying. And that's obviously a hurdle because, not everyone is going to take the time to go the extra step to click. It may seem like nothing, but it is a way that they suppress you. Are you shadow banned on Twitter? Do you have to like reveal replies that once you reveal them, they're not sensitive at all? They're not offensive at all?
I still really new to Twitter. A lot of things I probably just don't even know what it is. But I don't remember. I just never got any message from Twitter of warning or I don't know. I have to tell you, I don't know. I'm still so new. There's a lot of functions I don't know.
So you just went on and you couldn't tweet. Did you get a message that said like your account
No,
is restricted or you just couldn't do it anymore?
I just could not do anymore. Yeah. And first
And
I
then one
thought,
day you
oh,
could do it.
at first it was the last Monday night when I tried to retweet with comment. So I just could not do it. I thought maybe it's a technical issue that was just temporary, and but I can like and I can retweet. So that's what I told you. But I realized quickly my retweet was not really retweeted. So basically, the only thing I could do is like, and lasted for a week.
Okay.
So obviously, it's
Um,
not a technical issue.
right,
Yeah, just
right,
for one person. And we talk about that. I
right.
said, can you see my retweet? You said you can't. Can you see my like? You said you can. Yeah.
Right. One of the tricks I have found that Twitter uses is that you'll retweet a tweet, and that is supposed to make that tweet go to the top of your feed or
Yeah.
your profile,
Hmm.
and it'll be highlighted that you did retweet it, and then when you go to look, it's actually not at the top of the
It's not there.
profile. So
Yes. Yeah.
right. And then you
Hmm.
have to wonder, well, did this go out into the Twitter sphere? Is it in the feed? Are people seeing it?
Yeah.
So, and there's no way for us to know.
No. No.
Um, so what let's get into similarities you see between America and Mao's China that you grew up in. So we're seeing censorship on social media platforms, and um, I'm starting to see, I mean, I think we all are seeing censorship
It's
and
everywhere.
this
Yeah.
everywhere, right? Policies,
Hmm.
laws.
Hmm.
Do you have any specific examples that you can draw connections between China and America with your own experience?
Yeah. I like to tell you a little bit of the history, and I think it will be very useful for people to know and draw their own conclusion. Um, so the CCP took over China in 1949, and immediately they launched several political campaigns. One of them was the land reform, and they basically confiscated private land and redistributed to poor peasants. And they did the same in the city. They confiscated um, the factories, banks, private property. So basically, they wiped out the class in China, and that's what supposedly the revolution is about, to redistribute property and land and achieve their grand equity. Now we heard that word, right? Okay.
Yep.
So after achieving that, Mao, I think he just got very confident. He felt like he must have support of all the population. So in late 1950s, he started this 100 flower campaign. I don't think many people know about it. 100 flower is a phrase, and it's from the ancient China during the most open time in Chinese history, that people were encouraged to express their ideas and opinions, criticize whatever, and this let 100 flower bloom. So Mao said, "Yeah, I'm totally in control of China. So maybe we'll let people talk. I don't even know it's intentional or not." Okay, a lot of intellectuals, especially thinking people, those intellectuals, they thought that he was sincere. So they started to make suggestions, criticize, and they just express their opinion. Guess what happened? Crackdown, heavy crackdown. Anyone that expressed whatever opinion that Mao did not like was labeled rightist. They not just have a label, they're punished, brutally punished. A lot of them exiled, demoted, just basically become the so-called black class, which means you are now the enemy of the country. After that, people learned you don't want to speak up. You don't want to express your true opinion. People learned it so well. And so nobody says anything opposing the mainstream narrative by the CCP. Fast forward to the Cultural Revolution. Mao started this same thing again, said, big debate, and let something the similar line, let 100 flower bloom, let us talk. Yes, the Red Guards. Well, those Red Guards probably so indoctrinated, they probably did not even know the history, but they answered the call. So they have this, what we call the big character poster. So they are on the wall, kind of like today's social media, but
Right.
it's on the wall with big characters denouncing, criticizing this one and that one or whatever. But there is a big difference. This time, it is the debate on who are more loyal to Mao. So that's not diversity of ideas. It's like a compete to show your loyalty to Mao and to CCP. So I think that's what happened in Twitter. In the beginning, yes, in the beginning, both voices can be heard. And now they suppress, and suppress is not just that you're banned. Also, that carries other punishment, that you will be labeled white supremacist, racist, whatever. And you can lose your business, you can lose your job, you can lose whatever. So that's what's going on. Now, I see a lot of conservative. I said, wow, they still manage to be on Twitter. And those probably have to really self-censor. So they have to say things so carefully, so they know, they basically follow Twitter's rule. And
Yeah,
so that's where we are today.
Yeah, and I think you're identifying a pattern of us. You have two situations where people are believing that they're participating in a culture of free speech. Mao kind of reeled you guys in and gave you a false sense of security that you could say whatever you want, but that was really just to identify political dissidents and
yes.
then expunge them, right? To get rid of them and punish them, and then send a message to everyone else that this is your fate as well. Yeah, yeah. So I know you mentioned the Red Guard, and I think that is something that I wish more people knew about. Can you tell us about the Red Guard? Because we're seeing exactly that happening in colleges and universities too. So what is the Red Guard, and what were they sort of tasked with doing under Mao?
Yeah, and actually, Red Guard is synonymous of Cultural Revolution, and so Mao could not start that revolution without the young people being his foot soldiers. So those are actually started in the high school. Can you believe it? It started in the most prestigious high school in Beijing, and then spread to colleges and all over the country. And they just follow Mao's order that they're going to they're going to smash the old world. And one of the old world, one of things in that is part of the old world is what they call the bourgeois academic authority. Basically, just those teachers, those school or university administrators, they become the enemy of the country, or of the state, of the people. So those young people, and also it's just to them to find an authority figure. The easiest way is just turn to their teachers, and at the same time, Mao openly backed them, and they dismantled the law enforcement, and there was a specific order that police were not allowed to go to universities or campuses or school campuses on high school. So that's they were not allowed to go there to keep order. And so they started with teachers. At first, probably just get them out and condemning them, ask them to confess what they did wrong. At that time, it's not really about free speech. No one dared to speak. It's what they said before, what they wrote before, whatever that other people reported that they heard them say this and that. So at first it was just like a struggle session, humiliation, and but eventually, very quickly, actually turned into violence. And the first killing in school were done by a bunch of girls. And it's in one of the Beijing's normal universities high school. That high school is attached to that university, and it's all girls. They got the assistant principal out. And well, at first it's verbal. Always started verbal, and then start to beat her. And they beat her with sticks, with nails, and then with boiling water, and she was killed. And that
Oh
was
my
the first incident of Red Guards. Just imagine 15, 16-year-old girls were able to do that. And after the killing, they got a little kind of lost. They didn't know what to do. So they reported to the Central Culture Revolution Committee. They said, no problem, we support you. This is rebellion. After that, the violence spread out all over the country. And there are so many people were killed, teachers, and not just killed, they're tortured and killed. So to me, this is a lesson that we need to know, we need to learn. And those so-called rebels, those Red Guards, they always started with words. And then words
Right.
turned into violence.
Right, because we're seeing the same thing happening in universities. We have professors that are demanding. We have students demanding that they resign because they don't like their
Mhm.
ideas.
Yes.
We have even other professors are participating in these demanding oustings of
Mhm.
other professors. And we recently saw, I think it was UC Hastings Law School, where students then protested just a professor that worked there giving a talk to students. And I remember reading a news report that like this went beyond protest. This was meant to physically intimidate the
Yes.
professor because the students were gathered around him in close quarters. They were banging on the floor. They were making the floor shake. They were yelling and screaming, and it was rising to the level of, or it did rise to the level of
It's
physical
just
intimidation.
the
Right.
next step is very easy
Right.
to cross. Yeah, to take. And
Exactly.
so in China, why they hate those teachers and professors and school administrators so bad? Indoctrination, because they were
Right.
labeled the class enemy, and you treat enemy with no mercy whatsoever. And how about here? They were racists. Those conservative professors were labeled racist, white supremacist, whatever. How do you treat those? No mercy. Absolutely the same to me. It's just, I tweeted one. I think that might be the reason that I was banned. I said, it's the Georgetown Law School. Um, they are banning and chanting against this professor who said something about the Supreme Court nominee Jackson, something about
Hmm.
less black, something. I don't even remember the original statement. So they were banning the tables and shouting and chanting. And I tweeted out that we seen this before, and the next step will be bloody because I see it
Right. Right. And
possibly. But that's
because go
weeks
ahead,
ago,
sorry.
and that
Right.
that tweet was weeks ago. Yeah.
Um, Especially because we're dealing with young people who, um, their brains usually are not, or their brains are not fully developed. They're very emotional, or they're at least more emotional than adults. And it's very easy for young people to just make that switch from talking, shouting, and then, physically attacking somebody. Um,
Yes.
so one of the things that I think is really like hard to
Right.
talk to people about is just even broaching the subject that what we're seeing is this backdoor cultural revolution happening in our schools. Because if you're not someone like you who has experience with communism, if you're not engaged with current events, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. When you try to tell someone, I think this is a cultural revolution, and I think it's communism, or at least something like it, something
Mhm.
maybe an American Marxism, which is a version of communism.
Yes.
um, it's very hard to get through to people. And I think one of the reasons that is because American students are not educated about
Yes.
the dangers of communism.
Hmm.
We grow up being educated about World War II and Nazism, which of course is extremely important. But I remember learning as an adult, because again, I really didn't learn about the horrors of communism in school. As an adult, I learned that Mao killed far more people than the people that were killed in the Holocaust, which of course isn't to impugn, all of the people that died in the Holocaust. But I think if you said that to an average American, they would be like, really? What? They don't understand how many people died at the hands of communist dictators. Um,
Um,
Go
okay.
ahead.
I do have some to say about this. I
Mhm.
think that that communism or the crime of communism was not taught in our school or to the general public. I think it was by design. I think those people who want to implement communism here, they did not want people to know how horrible this ideology is. And I remember the early days of History Channel, and people jokingly call it Hitler Channel. It's all about World War II, Hitler, this and that, and people really well educated on that. You can ask average students, high school students, middle school, they all know about it. But not many know about communism. And when I talked to some young people, they said, you know what? Russia helped us to defeat Nazi, and I'm grateful to Russia. Yeah, I can argue about that, but they also need to know what Stalin did to his own people. He killed way more people, the Russian people or the people in Soviet Union, than Nazi did to the Russians. And the same that Mao killed more people than Hitler and Stalin combined,
Right, right.
but we don't know.
Um, right. It's hard to get an accurate estimate about how many people died. I think they range from, what is it, like 60 million to 80 million, but it's
80
hard to know
million.
because,
Yeah, you can
yeah,
never get a number, specific statistic from a communist country, and that's
right.
pretty good estimate. And the
Yeah.
Cultural Revolution alone, the estimate is from 2 to 20 million. But of course, we will
I
never
mean,
know.
yeah, and that range right there tells you how impossible it is to pin it down, because the difference between 2 million and 20 million is like,
It's a lot. I
I
know.
mean, a
Yeah.
universe, right? That makes a huge
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to promote an organization that I learned about. It's called Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And anyone listening, you can go to their website to learn about the victims of communism, but they also have a curriculum that you can download. They want schools to start teaching kids about the horrors of communism. And I think it would be a great idea if parents started bringing this into schools. This is a curriculum. It's already made. There are materials. It's pretty easy. We can bring it to schools and say, well, we want to teach accurate history too, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
here's
All
something
of it.
where we can right, all of the
Mhm.
history, the good, the
Yes.
bad, the
All of it.
ugly, and we need to
Mm,
start teaching more about communism. They have
mm,
curriculums for the middle school level and the high school level. I heard a representative speak from this organization. They are the real deal, and I just encourage people to go and learn about this organization, Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if you knew about this, She, but you can actually go on YouTube and see interviews of people that were conscripted as part of the Red Guard as students in China. and they're now interviewed after the fact as adults. And in these interviews, they're saying that they were brainwashed. And it's really devastating because people who were part of the Red Guard, now adults, I mean, they turned in their parents to the government. Their
Yes.
parents were killed or
Mhm.
exiled.
Yes.
And they look back on that now, and it's you see them break down crying, and they just say it. They say, I was indoctrinated, I was brainwashed. And I think that that's probably the the scariest part of all this, is to be a parent afraid that our own kids are going to be brainwashed into this new indoctrination by our government, telling our kids basically to judge each other on the basis of race and gender, that we all have value only according to this matrix of privilege and power. I mean, it's a social caste that, whether we you know, it's so frustrating because the other side, they think it's this really great ideology because it's presented to them as a way to kind of stand up for the little guy, right? Stand
Mhm.
up for the one without power.
Mhm.
And to a young person, that's very seductive because you're looking for a way to legitimize yourself in society. You want something to believe in. You want to feel purposeful and passionate. And when you have a person in a position of authority telling you, well, this is a worldview that helps everybody, when really it's oppressing everybody, it's very difficult for a child to see through that deception. And I think people like you and I want to protect our kids from having to learn the hard way, that that's not the way. Judging people on their immutable characteristics is not the way that we help people. It's anti-American, and we have centuries of history to learn from how it is the wrong ideology if you want to live a life of freedom.
Mm. Can I say a few words here? And
Yeah, of course.
yeah, I do think that we need to understand indoctrination is not telling students some blatant lies. They always package it in something that's so alluring, so attractive, and that's what communism is about. They fight for equity, and yes, sounds so appealing. That's what attracted my parents to join CCP. And both my parents, especially my father, is from landed family. He abandoned his family origin, joined the revolution, thinking he was doing something great for the humanity, for Chinese people so that everyone become haves, and there's no have-nots. And it's always that way. That's why it's called indoctrination. But also, I want to tell parents and teachers, and just you need to learn about what happened in history. And in China, the indoctrination ended that now the children turn parents in, and so that parents can get, executed, and also teachers. And the teachers, you think now you have control of our children. You want to indoctrinate them. Be careful, because if you do too much a good job, the student will turn on you, just like the Red Guards. But then it's not a matter whether you are woke. It's a matter whether you are woke enough or not. So those professors and those teachers, you too need to learn the lesson.
Right. You're referring to, the common expression of the useful idiot, that the government will use ideological people that agree with the government to further their political agenda. And then the moment that the government has achieved whatever stage of their, cultural revolution that they're looking to achieve, the moment that those useful idiots who believe in this ideology become maybe a little too powerful, right? They become a threat to the government. Those people are then put up against the ideological wall and executed or exiled. That's always the pattern that it
Always.
happens. So yeah, the tables will turn when you agree to authoritarian principles. They will turn on you. And so I try to tell people that disagree with me too, that if you support a government that wants to call me a domestic terrorist, well, you're next the moment that you
Exactly.
disagree with the government too.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's what happened to the Red Guards. They were doing the job that Mao wanted them to do. After they finished, and Mao just considered them a threat. And what did Mao do? Send them to the countryside to work in the fields. And I was one of them. Even though I was too little, I was not a Red Guard. I was just 7. But then after that, all the young urban young people were sent to the countryside. There was no jobs. Also, they did not want this Red Guards in the city that will cause problems. So after their use, they're discarded.
Right.
Same what happened
Can
to
you
the.
Can you go into some detail about what that was like to go from an urban high school student to now living with peasants and being re-educated by them? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I just can't even imagine how that even works.
Yeah. So actually, Mao, despite people working with their brain, because they think, and that's not good. He doesn't want thinking people, right? So he always wants people to become peasants or workers. He did not want intellectuals. He did not want educated people. So during the Cultural Revolution, he had this called May 7th Cadre School. May 7th is the day that he had this instruction that all cadre or the bureaucrats should spend time in re-education camp and by doing physical work. And that's how you get re-educated. And so my parents all went there, and they have to on in the evening, they have to study Mao's works. And during the day, they have to do physical work, because that's how the Mao want to make intellectuals peasants. So to me, and by then it's like the economy is so ruined, they just did not want young people to linger in the city. There's no jobs, there's no nothing, just sent to the countryside. So even though China was such a poor country, there was a huge difference between city people and countryside or the peasants. There was a huge difference. So when I went to the countryside with other 2 girls, 3 of us were sent to this production team. That is the lowest level of our commune. So there's no electricity, no running water, no nothing, basically stone age. And so if you ask me what a typical day, I will tell you one of the worst days that I will never forget. And that was in spring. We're preparing the field with manure, and there's no chemical manure. It's all natural and organic, which means human and animal waste, and then mixed with ashes from straws and whatever. And we have to get into a container and spread it with our hand. And people say, why don't you wear gloves? There's no gloves. So I have to do that with my hand. By the end of the day, of course, I was hungry. I could not eat, because when I feed myself, it was like I was in the depths of a shithole. It's overpowering. No matter how I wash my hands, I could not get that smell. I could not eat. I would just throw up. So eventually, I wrapped myself with some cloth in order to just really just not breathe and get bites. And so that is how primitive the condition is. But at the same time, that's how peasants lived forever. And they were the ones that put Mao in power, because they were the ones that Mao promised to give their land. They had land for like 2 or 3 years, and everything was confiscated back to by the state. And then we have this commune. Commune means collective farming. So everyone is a member of this collective owned land. When it's collective owned land, it's nobody's land. So that is, and also another thing is that his strategy kind of worked. So when city kids went to countryside, we could not do those farm work because they have been doing it forever. And then the peasants were laugh at us that we could not even do a simple task. And that reinforced to us that, yeah, the knowledge, the education is worthless in the real world, because in the real world, You do not need this knowledge, and you just need to know how to do physical work. So that's absolutely, in a way, real education. So despise the education, the knowledge, and just do physical work. So Mao really want to make China, taking back China to a really an agrarian society.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a kid and you can't complete a simple task, farming, you're
Yeah,
you're sort of like faced with your mortality, right? Because you think,
yeah,
I don't know how to make my own food, you know?
yeah,
And I can imagine a lot of kids would submit to that.
yeah.
Um, wow. Um, well, if we can transition for a second and talk about your day job, if you want to talk about it.
Mhm.
I read in your bio that you worked in informations management, and I was wondering if you were experiencing any kind of retaliation there, and if your job had, anything to say about your public participation in this topic.
Yeah, my company, just like many other, going woke, and I believe I'm the only one that openly oppose it, um, because I feel like if I don't say anything, and I'm just basically let the second cultural revolution happen to me. So I have been very vocal to oppose the woke agenda in my own division and also in the whole company. And the company was doing a harassment training. When I took that online training, and then the last section of it is gender fluidity, that we should respect people. If someone wear dress that's a male but wear dress, that's their choice, we should be respectful. And so I sent the CEO and the HR an email. I said, you are harassing us because you are talking about anti-harassment, but the radical agenda you are pushing, to me, is harassment. And they did not say anything, but they changed. They did not push that required online training. So I was making some progress there. And of course, I know the consequence. And the consequence finally, yeah, came that they just really make my job very difficult. They ask me to acquire some new skill that is not part of my professional field. It's just not. And I know the reason. The reason is so that I'll quit. And I did.
Yeah,
And I
that's
feel
how it
bad
usually
because
happens. Yeah.
yeah, that is a real battlefield. And I'm fighting with people face to face, not just online. And I do think that also in my division, we had a DEI Teams page. Like there were some really radical people putting all sorts of material there, and I went there and I discredited them. And now um, after I put all this comment on it, basically that corner is dead. That corner now is like two people likes, the same people and three people. So I basically killed it. And so I kind of miss the hand-to-hand combat
Yeah.
in this fight against wokeism, but I quit. I did quit. And so that I
Okay.
devote all my time to the mission. The mission is to educate Americans and tell them and really sound alarm that this, what's happening here, is communism. And I want to do it with my so-called lived experience. You can't
Yes.
argue with me. I lived through it. So I think that's a, use their tool to fight the battle.
Yes, using their language against them, I think, is a
Yeah.
successful tactic,
Mhm.
to, at least dumbfound them, right? To dumbfound the real believers who think that the language of their ideology is, supreme. And then, I just really love that you stayed in your job to fight this, because you really can make a lot of progress there. I know teachers that have quit But then I know teachers, well, I know one teacher in Rhode Island who is staying in her job, and it's miserable, but she's doing it because she's on the inside, and that's really a unique position to
I
fight
think
from.
that's so valuable. But those people are fighting in a very difficult environment. But those people need
Yeah.
our applause. Yes.
Yeah, and they need our support too.
Yes.
And I think that, just supporting them on social media makes a really big difference, because you're going to have people in face to face that are going to criticize you. And it really does make a difference to have people on social media tell you and send you messages that they support you. It can counteract any kind of
Yes.
demoralization you might be feeling
Yes.
at your job. So you're not going to change your conduct on Twitter. You're gonna keep doing what you believe, and that may, cause you to be suspended or banned again. But I know that you're not, you don't really believe in other platforms, at least right now. Can you talk a little bit
Not
about
right
that?
now, because and the reason I like Twitter is that's the only platform that allow us to engage the other side. And actually, I had many exchange with a bunch of communists. They self-claimed communists. A professor, he praised Mao, and he praised Stalin, and I got involved, just tweeting back and forth with him to expose him, and he kind of quiet down. So I love that. If we go to other conservative alternatives, I'm afraid it's like a echo chamber, and everyone agrees with me, and I agree with everyone. And to me, it's not as effective. I think we need to fight to have our voice heard in Twitter, and we need to
Yeah.
fight for Twitter as our platform, not retreat into a echo chamber. And I think we have hope now, right? It does look very
Yes.
hopeful now
Uh, right.
with Elon
Yeah.
Musk.
So exactly. Thank you.
Yeah,
You go ahead. You say it.
yeah, but being the largest shareholder of Twitter, and he does believe in free speech.
Yes. So
Without
so
free
Elon
speech,
Musk.
yeah,
Yes, he bought 10% of Twitter, and the reason why that is, it could be maybe saving Twitter, is because when you buy enough shares, you then get some power over the board of directors, and um, Elon Musk can, with enough shares, get some directors that believe in free speech on the board. And
yeah,
then that can have the effect of changing the rules of Twitter, or at least stopping the censorship that's happening. So until that happened yesterday, I mean, I have a backup account on Getter. I also use Facebook, and you do too. But I agree with you that Twitter is the premier platform. It's like where
absolutely,
everyone is.
yeah.
And you're right, you can reach the other side. And it's funny because my tactic is a little different, because I'm also scared I'm going to get suspended. The tactic of the other side that disagrees with you, they're always like reporting me. And so I started out wanting to engage the other side, but now I block basically everyone that disagrees with me, because they're a risk of they're a risk. They can report me just because they're mad at me,
Yeah.
and like what I tweeted was not hateful conduct. It was actually a very compassionate statement, where I said
Yes.
transgender children are mentally ill, and they need compassionate health care to protect them from being taken advantage of, and to protect them from just being cash cows for profit. It was something along those lines. And so that's a statement of compassion, not hate. And yet I was still, banned for a week for saying that. One tip that I learned that I want to share with you and other people listening is that um, someone told me that it's really in the replies where you have a risk of someone reporting you. So
Oh,
it's less likely that your individual tweet will be reported. Um, Maybe that has something to do with how many followers you have, but I can see, for me, it was the replies. Every reply about transgenderism, even though it wasn't hateful, was reported by my debater. And
okay.
I think that's because the people debating you get very mad, they get very upset, they feel threatened and triggered. and they're going to remember to report what they don't like. Whereas, you know, an individual tweet can just be floating in the Twitter sphere, and you know, the right person may not find it to report you and try to get you banned.
Okay, it's good to know. I'm
Yeah,
telling you, I'm still so new, and I need to know
yeah,
all the tips I can.
yeah,
I want
yeah,
to stay there, absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, she, your perspective and experience is so important. Thank you for sharing those stories with us. And I just want to let people know to follow you on Twitter. I have oh, I don't have your Twitter handle up, but your Twitter handle is X Van Fleet. Is that correct?
Yes, without the I, without I, just X Van Fleet. Yes,
Okay. All
please
right.
do
So please,
so.
yes, please follow she. And my Twitter handle is up for other people to follow as well. And thank you everyone for listening to this conversation. I hope it was as eye-opening for everyone as it was for me. Thank you,
Thank
she.
you so much. Mhm.